Yes, okay, so we've moved again. We've got another guest with us today, which is great. It's absolutely freezing where we are. Obviously, in a virtual sense, it's very cold as well. So I'll let the guest explain where we are. So, Donoxti, can you tell us something about where we are right now? Or where you are, more importantly?
Yes. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. We are in Montpellier, in the sunny, warm southeast of France. So I hope I'm bringing you warmth and sunshine.
Can you just introduce yourself a little bit more? What type of research do you do? What type of work do you do?
Okay, I'm assistant professor at Montpellier Business School, and my research is on. I have a practice-based analytical sensitivity, and I'm interested at the very high level on the way organizations analyze the external environment, especially when it's volatile, when it's disrupted. And I studied for quite some time now the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the diplomatic network, because they have centuries of practical experience in doing so. So I thought it was a good idea.
Natalia, you've got some questions?
Yes, I've got some questions about practice theory and this practice analytical sensitivity, as you said. First of all, I'm really curious about when and how did you first encounter practice theory?
Wow. So, well, it's such a good question. I did start with an interest in communities of practice at first. I like the social aspect of knowledge sharing and transmission, I would say. And I started studying diplomatic correspondence, and then I went for a deep dive into communities of practice, and then practice theories. And I started at first with a community that was embedded in international relations and diplomacy, with Frederica Beakey from the London School of Economics. And they organized with Polio and Sending and a lot of people in the practice theory and international relations, a cluster of researchers on studying diplomacy as a practice, as opposed to a focus on international law and rules and regulations, to look at the way things were done and the meaning that people attributed to their practices and as reflexive actors. And then I started a PhD in strategy at ESSEC Business School, and I said, you know what would be a good idea? To study diplomatic correspondence. And it needed some explaining at first because they thought it was quite unusual as a setting. And I said, well, they have centuries of practical experience in analyzing the external environment and managing political risk. And I wanted to know how they did it. So I went for some limited observations and interviews and analyzing diplomatic correspondence. And I realized the centrality of the role of diplomatic writing in organizing the work in a distributed network. So they're all over the world. There are many, many embassies and consulates and permanent representations, and they needed to coordinate very well, and they needed to inform the decision makers. And I work with my two wonderful co-supervisors, if you're watching, hello. Marie-Léon Gomez, who has a Bourdieu analytical sensitivity, and she is studying haute cuisine in France. And Davide Nicolini, the wonderful Davide at Warwick. So I shuttle back and forth with the Eurostar between Paris at ESSEC Business School and Coventry at Warwick Business School.
And what attracts you to practice theory? I mean, what kind of job does it do for you that other approaches can do?
Oh, so I have to be honest and say that I haven't prepared like a PowerPoint bullet points. I wanted this to be very informal. So if it sounds fuzzy at first, that's normal, but I try to make sense of what I say.
We don't mind fuzzy. That's fine.
Good. First, when I started my PhD, I was really interested in going in organizations. That's where I derived the most insights from, because sometimes I felt like we were isolated in our own bubble, and I wanted to be there, be on the ground, to observe and see for myself. The other thing that I enjoyed was the fact that you could have flat ontology, meaning you could observe practice where they are. And in the diplomatic network, I thought it was really interesting to trace the practice analytically. And so because it's such a large network, you could look at the micro level of analysis, and you could trace the writing or look at larger scales. And I like the fact that there was such an interesting conversation around, so I'm going to say, different levels of analysis, and that you could just go and trace the practice and go for it. And I thought it was really interesting, and it felt more intuitive for my way of reasoning, I would say. And also another thing is the fact that there are so many different theoretical lenses through which we could study a practice, that there is a very rich dialogue. And because I'm French, sometimes I like to be embedded in a lot of theoretical discussions. And so I enjoy that very much.
And currently, what practice theoretical concepts are you working with?
So I read too much, but I would say that for now, and I've read your books, Elizabeth, that's for sure. I use genres because I wanted to trace analytical practice, communicative practices analytically. Genres were really useful to trace communicative practices and to identify patterns as well, because I realized that it was very patterned, it was very structured, they were very reflexive about it. You could ask them and they would explain to you. And you would empirically observe through diplomatic correspondence that they had a genre repertoire, that is all the genres in the organization, and they could accomplish communicative actions through genre systems. So I went and read a lot of the work from structuration theory inspired Wanda Olikovsky and Joanne Yates, of course, and Natalia Levina. And I thought that Levina and Olikovsky had really wonderful insights about the fact that there is politics and power involved in it, meaning that symbolically genres have different symbolic weight, and you need to be in a certain position of power to use a certain genre. And I drew from that mostly, and then from Vijay Bhatia, who is a sociolinguist from City University of Hong Kong, I think. And he has developed a genre-based view of organizations, and I sort of imported these concepts into organization studies, but I think is more and more widely used, and there is more of a conversation around his approach. I hope I made sense somehow.
Absolutely, very, very inspiring assemblage of, I guess, compatible and complementary concepts and approaches. Thank you so much. Now, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so I'm some kind of frozen anthropologist from Lancaster, and I'm interested in tribes and whether you're kind of on your own in all of this work. You've mentioned a few other people. But which tribes are you part of?
Wow. If I say one tribe, will I make all the other tribes angry?
No, you can say several tribes.
Separate tribes.
And then several might be angry, I don't know.
So I've worked a lot with David Day, who's organizing a lot of summer schools on practice based on analytical sensitivity. So I went to Warwick several times. With Marie-Léon and David, they work a lot on healthcare and practice exposed to healthcare. And on the diplomacy side, I've worked a lot with Federica Beachy and the cluster of researchers she has gathered, and Merge Koos, who is a geographer, political geographer, if that makes sense. Who studied diplomacy as well. So I have one foot in each tribe. And there is the lovely cluster of researchers you're bringing together also.
Yeah, no, practice theory at the intersection of many tribes, actually. Great. So because of that, you've probably got lots of places you'd like to go to on our, or like us to go to on our map. So this is your choice. You can send us to talk with anybody you like on the map, or possibly mention more than one. Let's see. Where should we go next, Donoxti?
So I'm a little bit split because I teach a course called Digital Change, Work Organizations and Society for the MSc in Digital Transformation Business Consulting, where I try to look at the ethics of technology and the implication of digital platforms. And there is a really interesting research from Francesco Bonifacio in Milan, so in the warm and sunny Italy. And I think we could
Yes,
use
that
some
sounds
sunshine.
really good. Yeah, yeah.
And another thing is, because I've lived in Glasgow for some time and I was at the University of Strathclyde, the Strathclyde Business School. I wanted to pay tribute to Scottish people, Scottish researchers, and there is Natalie Dupin at the University of Edinburgh, and because she's working on collaborations for early researchers, I thought it would be interesting as well. Both are wonderful options. And to all of the others, I'm sorry, you're wonderful and interesting too. Next time, I promise.
Okay, that's great. We've got a climatic choice as well there. So as we go on our travels, what we've been calling in at these ports and places, and it's been really good to get a souvenir so that we remember this fascinating chat. So what would you like to give us to take on our travels?
So being French, sometimes I like to go philosophical and deep. Sorry. So I thought maybe a candle.
Okay.
Bring some light in
Yes.
the middle of darkness, and
Yes.
some heat as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Donoxti. So great. We're on our way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.